Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, not just a little bit, but all the way to Imperial China, a place of gilded palaces and ancient secrets. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the cool, smooth stones under your feet, the overwhelming weight of the red lacquer gates before you. You hear the distant, melodic chime of bells and the soft rustle of silk as unseen figures pass by. You're standing at the edge of the forbidden city, about to enter a world that seems like a fairy tale. But trust me, it's not. It's a world where you're beautiful and coveted, but also a possession, a world where your worth is measured not by who you are, but by who you can become for the Emperor. And you probably won't survive this, at least not in a way that you'd recognize as happy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're listening in, let me know where you are and what time it is. It's wild to think about people all over the world winding down for the night with these stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a deep breath, and you step inside. The air is thick with the scent of sandalwood and something else, a faint, lingering hint of old power and stagnant water. The scale of everything is just staggering. You're not in a city. You're in a universe. The courtyards are so vast they could swallow a dozen football fields. The roofs of the halls curling up like the claws of a dragon, their glazed tiles shimmering in the hazy sun. You can already feel the weight of this place. This isn't a home, it's a living, breathing entity with its own rules, and you are just a tiny, newly acquired part of its ecosystem. The sheer size alone is a constant, quiet reminder of the Emperor's authority. Historians still argue whether the Forbidden City's design was primarily for defense, or if its massive scale was meant to psychologically intimidate all who entered. Reinforcing the Emperor's divine status, it certainly works on you. You're not here as a guest, of course. You're here as a concubine. A member of the Emperor's harem. It sounds fancy, and it is. But it's a job that comes with some serious fine print. Your worth, your status, even your daily activities are dictated by a rigid hierarchy that goes far beyond a simple wife and mistress dynamic. You'll be living in the inner court, a place colloquially known as the rear palace, a world tucked away behind the main halls, hidden from the view of male officials. This is the realm of women, eunuchs, and the occasional, very important male visitor, the Emperor himself. The palace is split into distinct courts and living quarters, each one a step up or down the ladder. A quirky little fact, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, the number of concubines and palace women could reach into the thousands, a veritable city of women all living for one man's attention. It was like a royal version of a reality TV show, but with a lot more silk and a lot less prize money, unless you count getting to keep your head as a prize, which, is a pretty good one. This hierarchy is your life's new operating system. At the very top, you have the Empress, the Emperor's primary wife. She's the boss. Below her are various ranks, like imperial noble consorts, and then the concubines. Each level defined by title, number of servants, and even the type of food you're served. You can feel the weight of this structure pressing down on you already. Every single interaction, every meal, every walk through a courtyard, it's all a part of this massive, invisible game. You've just shown up, and you're at the bottom of a very, very long ladder. But it's a ladder, and that means there's a chance to climb. That's the hope. Anyway, the promise of power and influence, even if it's only a sliver of what the Empress holds. But for now, you are just another new face, navigating the long, silent corridors of a place where every glance, every whisper, and every moment is a test. Your first real lesson in this new world isn't about embroidery or poetry, it's about where you stand, or, more accurately, where you rank. You're not just a concubine, you are a lady, a title that, in this palace, is as common as a coffee shop barista. You learn that within the concubine ranks, there are distinct layers, each with its own set of privileges and limitations. At the very bottom are the attending ladies, often just commoners chosen for their beauty. Then you have the beauties and talents, a slightly higher tier. If you're lucky, you might be a favourite or a worthy, titles that hint at a more personal connection with the Emperor. But your goal, your every waking thought, will be to climb. The highest you can possibly hope to reach is the rank of imperial noble consort, a position just a breath away from the empress herself. This hierarchy isn't just about a title on a scroll, it dictates your entire life. It determines the size of your living quarters, how many servants you have, the quality of your silk robes, and even the kind of food you're allowed to eat. A low-ranking concubine might live in a small, damp room with a single maid, while a high-ranking consort has a grand courtyard, a team of eunuchs, and a personal chef. Historians still argue whether this elaborate system was primarily a way to manage the massive number of women, or if it was a deliberate strategy by the emperor to keep the concubines vying for his attention, thereby preventing them from forming strong, unified alliances against him. Either way, it works beautifully. You're immediately immersed in this social structure, a constant flow of bowing and courtesies, a performance you must master instantly. You bow to higher-ranking concubines, and they, in turn, ignore you completely. It feels like high school, but with higher stakes and no prom. You watch the older women, the ones who have been here for years, and you notice how their very posture reflects their rank. A lower-ranking concubine walks with her head down, while a consort glides through the courtyards with an air of practiced indifference, a human version of a high-end sports car. You're taught that even in death, this hierarchy matters. A low-ranking concubine might be buried in an unmarked grave, while a favoured consort could be entombed in her own mausoleum. A quirky tidbit: the number of fingernail protectors a concubine wore was often an unspoken signal of her status, with more elaborate ones indicating a higher rank and a life of leisure. Your first day is an exhausting blur of introductions. You meet the women who will be your rivals, your occasional allies, and the ones who will simply pretend you don't exist. You learn to read the subtle signals. A concubine who asks about your family is fishing for a potential alliance. A polite question about your health is just a way to gauge your weakness. And a compliment on your dress is probably laced with poison. You realize quickly that your beauty is just your entry ticket. Your true survival depends on your wit and your ability to play a long, patient game. The palace is a chessboard, and every woman here is a pawn, a knight, or a queen, all moving with calculated precision toward the emperor. You're also told that you must avoid eye contact with anyone ranked above you, a rule so deeply ingrained it's almost instinctual. It's like being a new intern at a huge corporation, but instead of being told to get coffee, you're told not to look at the CEO's favorite employees. Only here, the penalty for looking up could be a lot worse than just getting fired. You see a woman, much older than you, sitting alone in a small garden. She is dressed in plain, unadorned robes, her hair in a simple bun. You're told she was once a favoured concubine, but after failing to produce a male heir, she fell out of grace and now lives in quiet obscurity. She's a living reminder of the fleeting nature of this world, a human version of a cautionary tale. Your stomach turns with a mix of dread and resolve. This is what you're up against. This is the game you have to win. Before you could even fully grasp the politics of the palace, you had to survive the audition itself. You're led into a grand hall, its air heavy with incense and unspoken judgment. This isn't a performance, it's a meat market, but with a lot more pomp and circumstance. The selection process for concubines was a rigorous, often brutal, affair that began long before you even saw the palace walls. The first cut was made by local officials who scouted for beautiful girls from specific regions, often with a preference for particular body types and family backgrounds. It's like a beauty pageant, but instead of a crown, the prize is a life of servitude with a chance at power. Of course, you're standing in a line of other girls, all of you silent and nervous. An elderly eunuch and a few senior palace matrons walk slowly down the line, their eyes like scanners. They're not just looking for a pretty face, they're looking for an ideal. A broad, high forehead was considered a sign of good fortune. A small mouth was desirable, believed to signify a docile nature and a quiet disposition, and your feet, of course, had to be small and slender. The practice of foot binding, a painful and crippling process, was seen as a sign of upper-class status and was highly prized. It was a cultural quirk that, to a modern eye, seems horrifying. But here, it's a mark of beauty and breeding. A little tidbit: some scholars suggest that the foot-binding practice was initially a way for men to ensure their wives couldn't easily run away. Historians still argue whether the practice was purely aesthetic or a more sinister method of control. They examine your hands, your hair, even the way you stand. There is no warmth in their gazes, only cold, professional evaluation. You feel like a piece of porcelain, being judged for a tiny crack. You're told that in some dynasties, the selection process included a physical examination, with the matrons checking for physical flaws and signs of illness. They weren't looking for perfection in a magazine cover sense. They were looking for a woman who could bear healthy children and maintain the imperial bloodline. The entire process is centered on one thing: a fertile womb. Your body isn't your own. It's a vessel for the future of the empire. It's a reality check that hits you harder than any lecture. This isn't about love or desire. It's a transaction. Your youth and beauty in exchange for a chance at a life of luxury and influence. You realize that your value is entirely tied to your potential to produce an heir, preferably a male one. This is a game you play with your genes. One girl in front of you is dismissed with a flick of a hand. She looks at the ground, her face crumples, and she's led away. You don't know why she was rejected. Maybe her teeth were crooked, or her eyes were too close together. You don't ask. You just hold your breath and hope you pass the test. When they finally stop in front of you, their faces are unreadable. They look at your face, your hands, and your posture. One of the matrons whispers something to the eunuch, who nods slowly. Then, with no fanfare, they move on. You're still standing there. You've passed. The wave of relief that washes over you is so profound it's almost dizzying. It's a victory, but a strange one. You've just been selected to join a gilded cage, but for a brief moment, you feel a surge of triumph. You're in. Now the real game begins. You're taken away to a room where you are given a new name, a new identity, and a small gold-embroidered pouch. The pouch contains a list of your new duties and the first of many rules you must never, ever break. The moment you wake in your new quarters, the day's rituals begin. A small, unassuming eunuch brings in a basin of warm, fragrant water. This isn't just about getting clean, it's about a meticulous, time-consuming process that you must perform every single morning. Your face and hands are washed with a rice-based paste, a natural exfoliant believed to soften and whiten the skin. You then pat your face with a thin layer of pearl powder, mixed with water, to create a pale, almost porcelain complexion, a sign of high status. You learn that in ancient China, a sun-tanned face was associated with peasants and outdoor labor, so your goal is to be as pale as a ghost. A little quirky fact, some women even used a paste made from crushed seashells and a hint of lead, which, as we now know, was not a great idea for your health. Historians still argue whether the use of lead-based cosmetics was a conscious choice to achieve a certain look, or if the long-term health effects were simply unknown at the time. Next comes the makeup. Your eyebrows are plucked and redrawn in a slender, elegant arch. Your lips are stained with a paste made from crushed flowers, often a deep crimson or a subtle pink. This is a subtle art. Too much color and you look vulgar. Too little and you look unwell. You have to find that perfect balance. You're taught how to apply blush from a small silk pouch, using only the lightest touch on your cheeks. The entire process is a form of meditation, a slow, deliberate act of painting yourself into the perfect imperial concubine. It is a mainstream historical fact that women in the palace spent hours on their appearance. As their beauty was seen as a reflection of the emperor's taste and wealth, it wasn't about personal vanity, it was a matter of state. A concubine's face was a political statement. Your hair is a whole separate ordeal. Your maid, a young girl named Zhao Mei, meticulously brushes it until it shines like polished lacquer. She then begins the complicated process of styling it. It's not just a simple bun, it's an architectural feat of pins, extensions, and ornaments. Your final hairdo depends on your rank and the occasion. A lower-ranking concubine might have a simple twist, while a high-ranking consort could have a towering confection of hair adorned with jade pins, pearl flowers, and even delicate silk butterflies. You sit still for what feels like hours, a statue in the making, while Zhao Mei works her magic. You're also told about the importance of scent. You are given small silk sachets filled with fragrant herbs to tuck into your robes, and your bathwater is often infused with essential oils like jasmine or rose. The air around you must always be pleasant, a silent invitation to the emperor's attention. The final touch is your clothing. You are given a selection of robes, all in luxurious silk, but each one carefully chosen to match your rank. The colors, the patterns, even the type of embroidery, are all dictated by a strict code. You wear a subtle floral pattern, nothing too flashy, a colour that won't draw too much attention, but is elegant enough to be noticed. A concubine of a higher rank might wear robes with intricate patterns of phoenixes or dragons, symbols of imperial power. You realize you have to get used to this. Every single detail of your life, from the way you walk to the way you smell, is a performance. You are always on, always playing a part. Your body is a canvas, and your daily routine is the brush. It's an exhausting, beautiful, and utterly draining way to live. But as you look at your finished reflection, you can't help but feel a flicker of pride. You look like a woman who belongs here, a woman who is ready to play the game. Once your elaborate morning ritual is complete, the true work of the day begins. And that work is not about needlepoint or reading poetry. It's about survival. The moment you step outside your quarters, you enter a world of subtle, political maneuvering. Every interaction, every seemingly casual conversation is a move on the chessboard. The rear palace is a hotbed of gossip and alliances, and you must learn to navigate it with the skill of a seasoned diplomat. It's a mainstream historical fact that concubines formed factions based on shared family connections or geographical origins. They would band together, supporting one another to gain an advantage. But these alliances were as fragile as spun sugar. They could shatter at the slightest shift in the emperor's favor, leaving you exposed and vulnerable. You see it everywhere. An older concubine walks with two younger girls flanking her. They're a faction, their loyalty bought with favors or promises of future protection. Another woman, a lone wolf, walks alone, her eyes darting everywhere. You learn to spot the signs of a concubine in favor, the extra pin in her hair, the subtle smirk when she passes a rival, the way her servants walk with a little more swagger, and you learn to spot the signs of a concubine falling out of favor. Her robes are slightly faded, her servants look nervous, and no one dares to meet her gaze. This isn't just a game, it's a constant, high-stakes political drama, and you are a cast member whether you like it or not. Historians still argue whether concubines' power was purely based on their influence over the emperor, or if they wielded significant influence through their family's wealth and political connections outside the palace walls. Your job, for now, is to observe and listen. You learn that gossip is the currency of this world, who the emperor visited last night, what gifts he bestowed, what a certain concubine said in a quiet moment. All this information is valuable. You must listen carefully, weigh what you hear, and decide who you can trust. It's like being a spy in a very fancy dress. You'll overhear whispers about a concubine who fell ill after drinking a strange tea, or another who was caught trying to smuggle a letter out to her family. These stories are a constant, gentle reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the palace's beautiful facade. A quirky little tidbit to avoid poison and other forms of sabotage. Some higher-ranking concubines employed food tasters from a trusted, loyal family, your own personal maid. Xiao Mei acts as your first line of defense. Watching everything with a hawk-like intensity, you're taught to be polite to everyone but to confide in no one. You learn the subtle art of the non-answer, of smiling politely while giving nothing away. A concubine's best defense is an air of mystery. If they don't know your plans, they can't plot against you. You spend your afternoon in a small study, listening to a senior palace matron lecture you on court etiquette. She talks about the correct way to bow, the appropriate way to address the emperor, and the specific phrases you must use when speaking to the empress. It's an endless stream of rules, and you feel your brain turning to mush. But you force yourself to pay attention because one wrong move could cost you everything. You realize that your entire life is about to become a single, long performance, and every day is a dress rehearsal. While you're busy navigating the treacherous waters of court politics, there's an entire world of people who make your existence, and the palace's very function, possible. You catch glimpses of them as they move through the vast courtyards, silent and efficient. These are the servants, the eunuchs and palace maids who live to serve the imperial family. It's easy to forget they're even there, like ghosts moving through a beautiful house. But their labor is the invisible foundation of your gilded life. A mainstream historical fact is that the Forbidden City was powered by a massive support staff of thousands of people, most of whom were eunuchs and palace women. The sheer logistics of running this place were staggering. You see a line of young maids, all dressed in simple, grey-blue robes, carrying enormous basins of laundry. They move in perfect, synchronized steps, their heads bowed. You realize your own clothes, the intricate silk robes you put on every morning, are the result of countless hours of their work. From washing and dyeing the fabric to the meticulous embroidery, you also learn that these maids had their own strict hierarchy. An older, more experienced maid would be in charge of a dozen younger girls, and her position came with its own subtle forms of power and influence. They have their own gossip, their own alliances, and their own rivalries, a palace within a palace. The eunuchs, however, are a different story. They are everywhere, moving with a mix of practiced grace and a kind of haunting silence. They are the palace's lifeblood, acting as guards, messengers, accountants, and even librarians. They're a class of men who have been castrated to prevent them from having any personal interests with the concubines or other palace women, a sacrifice that gives them a unique position of trust and sometimes immense power. A quirky little tidbit is that a eunuch's position wasn't necessarily a sign of low status. Some high-ranking eunuchs, especially those close to the emperor, wielded more power and influence than even some noble ministers. They could be incredibly wealthy and were feared and respected in equal measure. Historians still argue whether the power of the eunuchs was a necessary evil to ensure imperial security or a corrupting force that ultimately weakened various dynasties. You notice how your personal eunuch, a man named Li, never speaks unless spoken to. His face is a mask of polite indifference, but you can feel his presence, a quiet, watchful energy. He is responsible for managing your affairs, from delivering messages to arranging your daily schedule. You are told that some eunuchs became so trusted that they were allowed to manage the concubines' finances, effectively controlling a significant portion of their wealth. It's a strange, symbiotic relationship. You rely on them for your every need, and they, in turn, rely on you for their position and security. As you walk through the gardens, you see a group of eunuchs tending to the meticulously pruned trees and flowers. They move with a quiet reverence, their hands calloused from years of work. You realize that while you are trapped in a gilded cage, so are they. Your lives are different, but both are defined by service to the emperor. And like you, they are constantly aware of the dangers. A misstep, a stolen glance, a moment of disobedience, and their lives could be forfeit. It's a sobering thought. You and your maids and your eunuchs are all just cogs in a massive, beautifully decorated machine. After what feels like an eternity of being evaluated and instructed, you are finally led to your new home. This is the rear palace, the secluded, private world of the emperor's women, eunuchs, and children. The name itself suggests a place of privacy and retreat, a stark contrast to the massive, public halls of the outer court. As you walk through the moon gates and along winding paths, you can feel the atmosphere change. The air seems softer, the sounds are muted, and the world of politics and officials feels a million miles away. It's a mainstream historical fact that the rear palace was a series of connected courtyards and residential quarters, a sprawling complex that housed the emperor's private life. It was a city within a city, designed to be beautiful, tranquil, and completely self-contained. Your new quarters are a small but elegant pavilion nestled by a koi pond. The walls are a deep crimson, and the roof is a vibrant green. Inside, the rooms are simple but beautiful, with dark wood furniture, delicate silk screens, and a small charcoal brazier to keep the chill away. It's not a grand palace, but it's a far cry from your previous life. You have a small courtyard with a single weeping willow tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. It feels like a gilded cage, but a very nice one. You meet your personal maid, Xiao Mei, who has been assigned to you. She is a young girl, no older than 16, with a quiet demeanor and intelligent eyes. She shows you where you will sleep, where your bathing basin is, and where you will eat your meals. She tells you that your food will be brought to you 3 times a day by a team of eunuchs, and that you are not to leave your pavilion without permission unless you are summoned. This is the first of many rules that will govern your life. The entire rear palace is a series of interconnected bubbles, and you are now living inside one. As you explore your new home, you can hear the soft murmur of voices from a nearby pavilion. You are not the only concubine here, you are just one of many, all living in close proximity. each a potential rival or ally. It's like living in a very exclusive, very high-stakes apartment complex. A quirky little tidbit is that the layout of the pavilions in the rear palace was often deliberate, designed to keep certain concubines close to the emperor's main residence. A subtle hint of favour. Historians still argue whether these arrangements were truly a sign of favour or if they were based on a more practical concern, like family ties or seniority. You sit by the window, looking out at the gardens. The air smells of jasmine and a faint, earthy scent from the pond. The world outside seems to slow down. You can see other women in the distance, walking along the paths, their colourful robes a flash of light against the muted tones of the buildings. They all look serene, peaceful, and utterly controlled. You realise that your life here will be about learning to live within these walls, to find a sense of tranquility in a world that is anything but. This is your new normal, and you have to find a way to make it your own. Living in the rear palace means you're constantly surrounded by whispers. Gossip is the main source of entertainment, information, and a powerful weapon. You quickly realise that no one is truly alone. The walls, the servants, and the very air seem to carry every piece of news. It's a mainstream historical fact that information flowed through the palace like a river, with eunuchs and maids acting as the main channels. They would pass along every bit of gossip. From who was seen talking to a minister to a rumour about the emperor's latest mood, you learn to listen carefully to these whispers, because they can tell you who is in favour, who is on the outs, and who is about to make a dangerous move. You spend your days listening and observing. You watch how a concubine named Consort Ming, a beautiful but seemingly cold woman, sits alone in a pavilion. You overhear two maids whispering about her, saying she's been trying to get the emperor's attention for months with no success. And then you see another woman, Consort Li, who is constantly surrounded by other concubines. They laugh with her, their voices a little too loud. You learn that she is a master of alliances, a charming and strategic woman who has built a network of support. You realise that your social standing isn't just about the emperor's favour, it's about the alliances you can build with the other women. You need friends, or at least people who will pretend to be your friends. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines would often exchange gifts, not out of genuine affection, but as a way to seal an alliance or to subtly signal their support for a particular faction. It's like a high-stakes, extremely polite game of poker. You understand that forming an alliance is a delicate dance. You can't be too eager, that makes you look desperate. You can't be too aloof, that makes you look arrogant. You have to find a way to make yourself valuable. Maybe you have a powerful family on the outside. Maybe you have a rare talent, like a beautiful singing voice or a gift for poetry. You need to offer something to the women who could help you. Something that makes them want you on their side. You also learn to spot the fakes. The concubine who smiles too widely. The one who compliments you on everything. They are the most dangerous. They're the ones who will use you and then discard you the moment you are no longer useful. Historians still argue whether these alliances were genuinely about emotional support or if they were purely transactional. A form of political insurance in a world where a woman's life could be upended in an instant. You suspect it's a bit of both. You also understand that the backstabbing is just as prevalent as the alliance-making. One wrong move, one overheard rumour, one slip of the tongue, and you could be ruined. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, a ridiculous-sounding beauty tip that was actually a warning. The palace is full of beautiful things that could ruin you. The beautiful words of a friend could be the poison that seals your fate. Your day ends as it began, with a feeling of being watched, of being judged. But now, as you lie in your bed, listening to the crickets chirping outside, you're no longer just a new face. You're a player in the game, you're learning the rules, and you're starting to understand that to survive, you must play with a cold, clear mind, and you must never, ever let anyone see your fear. The most important and terrifying part of your life as a concubine is the possibility of being summoned by the emperor. This is the moment that could change your life forever, or not at all. It's a mainstream historical fact that the emperor's nightly summons wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a highly ritualized process, managed by a team of eunuchs. You're told that the emperor would often have a tablet with the names of his concubines, and he would simply choose one. But the real decision was far more complex. The eunuchs would present him with a tray of plaques, each bearing the name of a concubine. Sometimes he would choose, sometimes he wouldn't, and sometimes he'd just let them choose for him. A little quirky tidbit is that in some dynasties, the concubines who were not selected were forbidden from bathing or using fragrant oils, a punishment meant to discourage them from trying to tempt the emperor. When the summons comes, it's not a knock on the door, it's a quiet, respectful eunuch arriving at your pavilion. He will not speak, but simply bow and gesture for you to follow. Your heart leaps into your throat. This is it, the moment you've been working for, preparing for. You are quickly dressed in a simple, unadorned robe, no jewelry, no elaborate hairstyle. You are meant to be a blank slate, a canvas for the emperor's attention. You are not allowed to walk to his bedchamber. Instead, you are wrapped in a thick blanket and carried on the back of a eunuch, a practice that, as you're told, was meant to prevent any chance of assassination or an unplanned pregnancy. It's a strange, humbling, and utterly surreal experience, being carried through the dark. Silent halls of the forbidden city like a roll of silk. You arrive at his bedchamber, and you are ushered inside. You are told to remove your robe and slip into his bed, where you will wait for him. You are not allowed to speak, to make any sound unless he speaks to you. You are a silent, waiting presence. You are taught that you must only speak when spoken to, and you must always refer to him as Your Majesty. You are also told that your time with him is limited. The eunuch in charge of the ritual will be waiting outside, and when the allotted time is up, he will knock on the door and call out a respectful reminder. You realize that your time with the emperor is not a moment of private intimacy. It's a scheduled, carefully managed affair. Another part of the grand imperial machine. Historians still argue whether the emperor's rituals were a form of psychological control over the women or a necessary way to maintain order and tradition in the palace. The anticipation is almost unbearable. You lie there, listening to the muffled sounds of the palace, your mind racing. What if he doesn't like you? What if you say the wrong thing? What if you do something that displeases him? The pressure is immense. Your entire future, and the future of your family, hangs in this moment. And then, you hear the door open, and you know he's there. Your life, as you know it, is about to change forever. Your time with the emperor, no matter how brief, is the single most important moment of your life. And you learn, very quickly, that imperial favor is a fickle and fleeting thing. One night, you are the center of his universe. The next, you are just another woman in the vast rear palace. It's a mainstream historical fact that the emperor's attention was constantly divided, and his favor could shift for a variety of reasons. From a new concubine arriving to a simple change in his mood, your job is to make every moment count. You learn to speak little but listen more, to anticipate his desires, and to offer him something he doesn't get from the other women, a moment of peace, a witty observation, or a new poem. The jealousy it inspires is a tangible, almost suffocating force. You see it the moment you return to your quarters. The glances from the other concubines are colder. The politeness is more strained. You are no longer just a new face, you are a threat. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines would often leave small, symbolic gifts at the emperor's door in the hopes of being chosen, a silent plea for attention. This practice was sometimes seen as a gesture of desperation, but for some, it was an art form. You learn that imperial favor is a double-edged sword. While it brings you gifts and prestige, it also makes you a target. You are more likely to be the subject of malicious gossip, and more likely to be the victim of a plot. You have to be more careful, more guarded than ever before. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and think about how even the things that promise beauty and health could be poison in a world like this. The favor of the emperor, which seems so beautiful and desirable, could be the very thing that leads to your downfall. Historians still argue whether the emperor's deliberate rotation of concubines was a conscious strategy to prevent any one woman from gaining too much power, or if it was simply a natural result of having so many women vying for his attention. You suspect it was a little of both. It's a game of chance, but with a lot of skill involved. You can't control when he'll call on you, but you can control what you do with the time you have with him, and what you do with that time will determine your entire future. You see a woman who was once a favored concubine. She walks with a kind of resigned sadness, her robes a little less vibrant, her jewelry a little less shiny. She is a reminder that the sun of imperial favor will eventually set for everyone. Your time in the spotlight is limited, and you must use it to secure your future, to build alliances, and to do the one thing that will give you true power: bear a son. But for now, you are in the light, and you must shine. Knowing that the shadows are always waiting, with every subtle glance of approval or shared moment with the Emperor. A new layer of responsibility and power was added to your life, and that's when you learn about the importance of managing your imperial finances. It's a mainstream historical fact that concubines, especially those in favor, were given an allowance from the imperial household, but they also received gifts from the emperor and their own families. This wasn't just pocket money, this was your political capital. The higher your rank, the bigger your allowance, and the more valuable the gifts you received. A quirky little tidbit is that the value of these gifts wasn't always measured in gold or jade. Sometimes, a gift of a rare silk or a piece of calligraphy from the emperor himself was far more valuable, as it was a public display of his affection and your status. You have a personal eunuch, the man named Li who manages your affairs, and he handles your money. He records every penny you receive and every expense you make. You learn that your wealth is meant to be used for specific purposes. You buy gifts for the emperor's family members on special occasions. You pay for your own expensive silks and cosmetics, and you even use it to bribe the right people. It's like a corporate expense account. But instead of buying a client lunch, you're buying loyalty from a servant or paying for a rumor to be spread about a rival. You realize that this money is your tool, your leverage. A concubine with no money is a concubine with no power. Historians still argue whether this system was a deliberate method of control, with the emperor keeping a tight leash on the women's finances, or if it was a practical way to manage a large household. You suspect it was both. A powerful concubine could use her wealth to influence ministers and officials outside the palace walls, and the emperor was always aware of the danger of a woman becoming too rich and too powerful. You remember the old saying, "The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." But here, it's the purse that holds the coins. Your ability to wield this wealth, to use it to secure your position, is just as important as your beauty or your ability to bear a son. You look over the ledger that Li presents to you. Every line item is a potential alliance or a threat neutralized. The money you spent on a beautiful jade pin for the Empress was a gesture of respect, a quiet nod to her authority. The money you gave to a low-ranking eunuch was a subtle bribe, a way to ensure he would bring you valuable gossip. You understand that in this world, money doesn't just buy you things, it buys you security, influence, and a chance to survive. It's an invisible shield, a quiet weapon. You've spent your mornings on your appearance and your afternoons on politics. But the evenings bring a different kind of obligation, your education. It's a mainstream historical fact that concubines were expected to be more than just beautiful faces. They were expected to be well-rounded companions for the emperor. This meant a rigorous curriculum of lessons in poetry, calligraphy, and music. Your teachers are often older eunuchs or palace women who have spent their entire lives in the service of the court. They are strict, demanding, and they expect nothing less than perfection. Your calligraphy lessons are a quiet, meditative affair. You sit on a small cushion, your hand poised over a sheet of rice paper. The ink smells of pine and a hint of something earthy. You are taught how to hold the brush, how to control the pressure, and how to form each character with a delicate grace. You're told that your handwriting is a reflection of your character, and that an elegant, precise hand could impress the emperor more than a lavish dress. A quirky little tidbit is that some of the most famous poems and calligraphy in imperial history were written by concubines who were, at the time, just low-ranking members of the court. Their art was their voice, a way to express their feelings and ideas in a world where they were often silenced. Next comes music. You learn to play the guzheng, a beautiful zither-like instrument with a haunting, ethereal sound. Your teacher, a blind eunuch with gnarled, ancient hands, guides you through the scales. You learn to pluck the strings with a gentle touch, to make the notes sing. You realize that this isn't just about making music, it's about creating an atmosphere of tranquility and beauty, a moment of peace for the emperor when he is surrounded by the burdens of state. Historians still argue whether the emperor truly enjoyed these performances or if they were simply a part of the expected ritual of courtly life. A form of high-class entertainment? You suspect that it was a bit of both. The palace was a place of endless political turmoil and a moment of quiet. Beautiful music could be a rare and valuable escape. You also have lessons in poetry. You learn to write about nature, about love, and about the fleeting nature of life. You are taught how to use metaphors and imagery to express your emotions without being too direct, a skill that is just as useful in the real world of palace politics. You learn that a well-placed poem could be a subtle plea for attention or a quiet expression of your loyalty. You are told that the emperor might not remember your face, but he might remember a beautiful line of poetry you once wrote. You end your day feeling exhausted but also strangely fulfilled. You're not just a passive object of the emperor's desires, you are a person with skills and talents, a mind that is constantly being sharpened. You're still a prisoner, but at least your cage is a beautiful one, filled with art and knowledge. It's a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. One of the most important skills you learn as a concubine isn't about music or art, it's about the art of imperial conversation. You are not allowed to speak your mind freely, and you can't say exactly what you're thinking. Instead, you learn to master the language of subtlety and flattery. You learn to read the emperor's mood from the slightest change in his expression and to adjust your words accordingly. It's a mainstream historical fact that courtly conversation was a highly ritualized and coded form of communication. A conversation with the emperor wasn't a casual chat, it was a performance, a careful dance of words where every single phrase was chosen for its potential effect. You learn that a direct compliment is seen as vulgar. Instead, you must find a way to praise him indirectly, perhaps by admiring a poem he wrote or a piece of calligraphy he created. You might say, "Your Majesty's hand is so divine, I feel unworthy just to look at it." You learn to listen more than you speak. You ask him about his day, about the burdens of state, and you offer your opinion only when he asks for it. You are told that the emperor spends his days surrounded by ministers who want to argue with him or to convince him of something. Your job is to offer him a moment of peace, a conversation that is light and pleasant and requires no mental effort on his part. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines were often taught to use specific animal metaphors to describe the emperor. You might call him a dragon to signify his power and authority, or a phoenix to praise his wisdom. This wasn't just flowery language, it was a way to show your respect and to place him on a divine level, a gesture that was highly valued. Historians still argue whether the emperor's affection for certain concubines was based on their physical beauty or their ability to provide him with an intellectual and emotional respite from the pressures of his life. You suspect it's the latter. The palace is filled with beautiful women, but only a few can offer him something more. You learn to be witty without being sarcastic, and to be clever without being a know-it-all. You learn how to use a single phrase to convey a world of meaning. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how a seemingly ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, an ugly truth could be dressed up in beautiful, pleasing words. You understand that your words are a shield and a weapon. You can use them to protect yourself or to subtly undermine a rival, but you must be careful, because a single wrong word could seal your fate. You realize that your voice is your most powerful tool, and you must use it with care. In a world defined by confinement and political intrigue, the gardens of the rear palace are a rare sanctuary. You learn to find a different kind of solace here, away from the watchful eyes and whispered gossip. It's a mainstream historical fact that the imperial gardens were meticulously designed to create a sense of tranquility and a microcosm of the natural world. They were filled with man-made hills, serene ponds, and pavilions for quiet contemplation. You walk along winding, stone paths, the sounds of the palace fading into the background, replaced by the gentle splash of a waterfall or the rustle of leaves. You sit on a small wooden bench by a pond filled with bright orange and white koi. You watch them glide through the water, their movements slow and graceful. You realize that they, too, are trapped in their little world, but they seem to have found a kind of peace in it. You notice the perfectly placed rocks and the carefully trimmed trees, and you realize that every detail is intentional. This isn't a wild, untamed garden. It's a work of art, a perfect, controlled version of nature. It's a little quirky tidbit that the layout of these gardens often included symbolic elements, with certain plants and rock formations representing longevity, prosperity, or even the different provinces of the empire. Historians still argue whether the gardens were a genuine place of retreat for the concubines and emperor, or if they were another tool of imperial control. a beautiful illusion designed to make a gilded cage feel more like a home. You suspect they are both, for a brief moment. As you watch a butterfly flutter by, you can almost forget where you are. You can almost forget the politics, the rivalries, and the constant fear. You can just be a person in a garden, watching the world go by. You realize that these moments are a necessity for your survival. You need to find a place where you can breathe, where you can let your guard down, even for just a few minutes. You find a small, hidden pavilion tucked away in a corner of the garden. No one seems to come here. It's overgrown with ivy, and the paint is peeling, but it feels like your own secret place. You sit there and listen to the birds chirping, and for the first time since you arrived, you feel a sense of peace. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how something ugly could be beautiful. In the same way, a quiet, almost forgotten corner of a garden could be the most beautiful and valuable part of your day. One of the rare moments you get to step out of your secluded pavilion is for a grand imperial feast. This isn't just a meal, it's a spectacle, a performance of power, and a rigid display of social hierarchy. It's a mainstream historical fact that these banquets were not daily occurrences. They were held for special occasions, such as birthdays, festivals, or the visit of a high-ranking official. The dining hall is massive, a cavernous space filled with the scent of spices and roasting meats. You are not seated at a table with the emperor. Instead, you are seated at a table with other concubines, your position determined by your rank. The higher your rank, the closer you are to the head of the hall. The food is a work of art, with dishes made to look like birds, flowers, and landscapes. A quirky little tidbit is that the emperor would often have a team of food tasters, usually eunuchs, who would try every dish before he did. A necessary precaution against assassination attempts. You are served a series of small, delicate dishes, and you are told to eat slowly and with grace. You're told not to talk too much, and to watch the other concubines to see how they're behaving. You watch as a high-ranking consort, Consort Li, discreetly sends a servant to get a specific dish from a different table, a subtle show of her power and influence. Historians still argue whether the emperor's banquets were a genuine expression of generosity and hospitality or a calculated display of his power and wealth, a way to show off the resources of the empire to his officials and foreign guests. You suspect it was both. The food is beautiful, but you know that the real game is happening around you. The alliances are being formed and broken with a single glance, and the favor of the emperor is being measured by the kind of food you're served. You realize that everything in this world, even the most mundane of activities, is a performance. You look across the room and see the emperor, sitting on a raised platform with the empress. He looks distant, a little bored, and you realize that even for him, this is an obligation, a part of his duty. You remember that a concubine's job is to offer him something he doesn't get from his daily life. And you realize that your presence at this banquet isn't just about eating, it's about being seen, about showing everyone that you are here, that you are a part of this world, and that you are a part of his world. Of all the pressures in your life, the most intense is the pressure to bear a son. It's a mainstream historical fact that a concubine's status was largely determined by her ability to give birth to a male heir. A son was a guarantee of your future, a shield against the whims of the emperor, and a path to power and influence for both you and your family. A daughter, while loved, was seen as a temporary gift. She would eventually marry into another family, but a son would stay in the palace, and he could one day become the heir to the throne. This isn't just a matter of pride, it's a matter of survival. You watch the older concubines, the ones who have been in the palace for years, the ones who have sons walk with a different kind of confidence. They are no longer just women, they are mothers of princes. They have a permanent place in the palace, a kind of security that no amount of imperial favor can buy. And you see the women who have failed to produce a son. They are ghosts, fading into the background, their power and influence slowly draining away. It's like a high-stakes lottery, and the prize is a baby boy. The competition is a cold, calculated game. You learn that some concubines would use ancient remedies and strange concoctions, like a tea made from a rare root or a paste made from a secret herb, in the hopes of increasing their fertility. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would even try to sabotage their rival's health to ensure they would not be able to bear a child. Historians still argue whether these methods were truly effective or if they were just a desperate attempt to control an uncontrollable outcome. You suspect it was a little of both. You are told stories about women who would hide their pregnancy from their rivals, only revealing it when it was too late to be harmed. It's a game played with your body, and your body is a battlefield. You realize that your life here, for all its beauty and luxury, is ultimately a waiting game. You are waiting for the Emperor to call on you, and you are waiting for your body to do its job. It's a strange, surreal existence, a mix of lavish living and deep-seated anxiety. You are a pawn in a game of genetics, a woman whose worth is tied to her ability to produce an heir, and you know that if you fail, you will be just another ghost in a long line of them. But for now, you wait and you hope. If you do bear a son, your life changes entirely. You are no longer just a concubine, you are a mother of an imperial heir. It's a mainstream historical fact that a concubine who gave birth to a prince was elevated in rank and status, often becoming a consort or even a noble consort. Your value to the emperor and the dynasty increases exponentially, and with it, your power. The other concubines, who once saw you as a rival, now see you as an ally, a woman whose influence could help them in the future. The endless backstabbing and rivalries don't disappear, but they become more subtle, and you are no longer the most vulnerable person in the palace. Your days are no longer just about beautifying yourself or playing politics. They are now focused on your son. You are responsible for his education, his health, and his well-being. You watch over him constantly, afraid that a rival concubine will try to harm him. You have more servants, more guards, and more money, all of which are dedicated to the protection and upbringing of your child. A quirky little tidbit is that in some dynasties, the emperor's mother, if she were a concubine, would be given a private tutor to learn the rules of the court so she could properly raise her son to be a wise and just ruler. It was an investment in the future of the empire. Historians still argue whether the mother of a crown prince had more real power than the empress, who was the official mother of the heir. You suspect that the empress held the formal power, but you, as the biological mother, had the emotional influence. You could guide your son, whispering advice in his ear, teaching him about the palace's true nature, and shaping him into a man who would one day rule. You are a puppet master, and your son is your greatest puppet. You look at your son as he plays in your courtyard, and you feel a fierce, protective love for him. He is your future, your legacy, and your shield. You remember how you felt when you first arrived at the palace, a helpless girl with no power. But now, you are a mother, and you have a purpose. Your life is no longer just a waiting game, it is a mission. You will raise this boy to be a great emperor, and you will do whatever it takes to ensure his safety and his ascension to the throne. You are a different kind of person now. You are a mother. Your new life as a mother is a world away from your old one, but it comes with its own unique set of dangers. The greatest of these is the Empress. She is the official mother of all the Emperor's children, and she has a certain amount of power over you. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Empress was in charge of the rear palace and had the authority to discipline, punish, or even dismiss concubines who stepped out of line. Her gaze is a cold, calculated scrutiny, and you feel it every time she enters a room. You are expected to pay your respects to her every morning. You bow deeply. You call her Mother Empress, and you wait for her to acknowledge you. She will ask you questions about your son, about his health, and about his studies. Her questions are not a sign of warmth, they are a test. She is checking to make sure you are doing your job and that your son is not becoming a threat to her own child, if she has one. You must answer her questions with a mix of respect and humility, never showing a hint of arrogance or pride. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would use these meetings to their advantage, subtly complaining about their rivals or offering a small bit of gossip to win the Empress's favour. It was a dangerous game, but for some, it was a risk worth taking. Historians still argue whether the Empress was a mother figure to the concubines or a ruthless political player who saw them as rivals for her husband's attention and a threat to her family's power. You suspect she was a bit of both. She is a woman who has worked her entire life to get to the top, and she will do whatever it takes to stay there. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how something that promises beauty can be a lie. In the same way, The Empress's beautiful clothes and polite demeanor could be a shield for a very cold and calculating heart. You learn to read her mood, to see the slightest flicker of annoyance in her eyes, and to know when to speak and when to be silent. You are a different kind of person now. You are not just a woman, you are a mother, and you must protect your son from the dangers of the palace, including the one woman who is supposed to be his mother. Your life is no longer just a game of survival, it is a game of protection, and you will do whatever it takes to win. The palace's rhythm is not set by a clock, but by the turning of the seasons. You find yourself participating in a series of elaborate rituals of a changing season. Ceremonies that mark the passage of time and the connection between the imperial court and the natural world. It's a mainstream historical fact that these rituals were deeply ingrained in Chinese imperial life, a way of showing respect to the gods and ensuring a prosperous harvest for the empire. You are expected to attend these ceremonies, and your participation is a quiet display of your loyalty to the emperor and the dynasty. You attend the spring ritual, a ceremony meant to welcome the new growth and the promise of a bountiful year. You watch as the emperor offers sacrifices to the gods of the earth and grain. The air is filled with the scent of incense, and the chanting of the priests is a hypnotic, ancient sound. You are dressed in a specific color of silk, one that corresponds to the season, a subtle reminder of your place in the universe. A quirky little tidbit is that the concubines were often arranged in a specific order during these ceremonies, with their placement determined by their rank, a visual representation of the court's hierarchy. Historians still argue whether these rituals were a genuine expression of religious faith or a political tool used by the emperor to legitimize his rule. You suspect it was a mix of both. They are beautiful, elaborate ceremonies, but they are also a reminder that the emperor is not just a man, he is the son of heaven, and his actions are believed to have a direct impact on the well-being of the empire. You realize that your life here is not just about your personal survival, it is about your place in this grand, cosmic drama. You watch as the seasons change, and with them, the rituals. You attend the summer ritual, meant to pray for rain, and the autumn one, a celebration of the harvest. Each one is a performance, a part of the grand imperial machine. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an odd thing could be a part of a beautiful routine. In the same way, these strange and beautiful rituals are a part of a larger, more beautiful story. Your life here is a tapestry of personal moments and public performances, and you must learn to navigate both with grace. Sometimes, the emperor leaves the forbidden city, and you, as a concubine, get to join his traveling retinue. It's a rare and exciting opportunity to see a world beyond the palace walls, a world that you have only heard about in whispers. It's a mainstream historical fact that emperors would travel to visit different parts of their empire, to inspect military garrisons, or to perform religious rituals at sacred sites. The journey was a massive undertaking, a moving city of servants, eunuchs, and concubines, all traveling with the emperor. You travel in a lavishly decorated sedan chair, carried by a team of eunuchs, and you are surrounded by guards, a testament to your value to the emperor. As you travel, you see a world you could only have imagined. You see farmers working in their rice fields, merchants selling their wares in bustling markets, and children playing in the streets. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how it was a symbol of your confinement. But out here, in the world, you see a different kind of life, one that is messy and loud and real. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines were often dressed in simpler clothes during these journeys to avoid drawing attention from the public. Your identity as a concubine is hidden behind a veil, and you are just another member of the emperor's massive entourage. Historians still argue whether these trips were a way for the emperor to connect with his people, or a highly choreographed political show designed to reinforce his power. You suspect it was a bit of both. You are a part of the show, a beautiful, silent object meant to impress the public. But you also get a glimpse of a different kind of life, one that is not defined by the walls of the Forbidden City. You see the vastness of the empire, and you realize that your world, as big as it feels, is just a tiny part of a much larger story. You spend your days traveling and your nights in temporary palaces, each one as beautiful as the last. You still have to perform your duties. But there is a sense of freedom here, a feeling that you are a part of something bigger. You are a traveler, a witness to the world, and for a brief moment, you can almost forget that you are a prisoner. While you are a part of the emperor's world, you realize your life is made possible by the unseen labor of your servants. Your closest confidant and shadow is your maid, Xiao Mei, and a large part of your day is spent with her. You learn to see the court from her perspective. It's a mainstream historical fact that palace maids were not just servants, they were often confidants, spies, and a concubine's first line of defense against her rivals. They slept in your rooms, they watched your every move, and they were the ones who saw the real you, away from the watchful eyes of the court. You see Xiao Mei's daily routine. She wakes before you do, her small, quiet body moving through your quarters. Preparing your morning water and laying out your robes, she manages the other servants assigned to your household, making sure your food is delivered on time and your clothes are clean. You also learn that she has her own dreams and fears. She has a family outside the palace walls, a brother she hopes to one day see again. You realize she is just as much a prisoner as you are, but her cage is a different color. A quirky little tidbit is that some palace maids would secretly learn to read and write, using their intelligence to get a better position or to escape the palace after their service was complete. Historians still argue whether the maid's loyalty was to their concubine or to the palace itself, which could offer them a life of relative security. You learn that Xiao Mei is not just a servant, she is a part of your life. You rely on her for everything, from the latest gossip to a quiet moment of companionship. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the maids, who are seen as the lowest rung of the palace hierarchy, are the beautiful, essential part of your life. They are the ones who truly understand the silent language of the palace, the ones who see the cracks in the beautiful facade. And you realize that your life here is a shared experience, one that is built on the backs of the invisible people who serve you, while palace maids are the quiet, invisible backbone of your world. The eunuchs are a different kind of presence altogether. They are everywhere, moving with a practiced silence and a mysterious purpose. You learn about the eunuch's double life, a reality that is far more complex than a simple life of servitude. It's a mainstream historical fact that eunuchs were castrated to prevent them from having any biological children, a sacrifice that was believed to make them more loyal to the emperor and less of a threat to the imperial bloodline. This castration also gave them a unique position of trust within the inner court, a world forbidden to other men. You notice how your personal eunuch, Li, is not just a servant, he is an accountant, a political advisor, and a confidant. He knows more about the inner workings of the palace than anyone you have ever met. He knows which concubine is on the outs, which minister is in favor, and which rumor is about to explode. You realize that the eunuchs are the eyes and ears of the palace, and they are masters of information. A quirky little tidbit is that some eunuchs were able to amass immense fortunes and build powerful networks of spies and allies, wielding a great deal of power behind the scenes. Historians still argue whether the eunuch's power was a necessary check on the power of the ministers or a corrupting force that ultimately led to the downfall of several dynasties. You suspect it was both. You are told stories about powerful eunuchs who were able to control entire dynasties from behind the scenes, men who were more powerful than any minister or general. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, though, the eunuchs, who were seen as incomplete men, were able to use their unique position to build a beautiful, powerful life for themselves. They were a necessary part of the palace's ecosystem, a strange and powerful presence that you had to learn to navigate. You realize that your life here is a constant game of alliances, and that the eunuchs, with their quiet power, are the most important allies you can have. In the grand theatre of the palace, your health is a matter of state, not personal well-being. You learn this the hard way. It's a mainstream historical fact that palace medicine and health were a mix of traditional herbal remedies and ancient superstitions. You have a team of eunuch doctors and female physicians who are assigned to your care, and they are responsible for ensuring that you are always in perfect health. They check your pulse every day, they inspect your tongue, and they ask you a series of questions about your diet and your sleep. This isn't just about your health, it's about your value to the emperor. A sick concubine is an unproductive concubine. You are given a series of teas and concoctions to drink, each one meant to balance your qi and keep your body in perfect harmony. Some of the ingredients are familiar, like ginger and ginseng, but others are strange and exotic. A quirky little tidbit is that some of the more fringe treatments involved using powdered animal bones or a paste made from crushed gemstones, ingredients that were believed to have magical, life-extending properties. Historians still argue whether these remedies were truly effective or if their power was purely psychological. A placebo effect that was used to keep the concubines healthy and hopeful. You suspect it's a bit of both. You also learn about the dangers that lurk in the palace. You are told stories about concubines who were poisoned by a rival, a slow-acting poison that would make them weak and infertile. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how something that promises beauty could be poison. In the same way, the food you eat and the water you drink could be laced with a substance that would destroy your health. You learn to trust no one, to watch every move, and to be careful of every single thing you put in your mouth. You are a human being, with a human body. But in this world, you are just a fragile vessel. Your health is not your own. It is a matter of state, a political tool that can be used against you. And you realize that your job is not just to be beautiful and graceful, it is to be healthy, to be strong, to be a survivor in a world that wants to break you. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, you find a different kind of purpose. This is the time for embroidery and arts, skills that are seen as a sign of a well-rounded and refined concubine. It's a mainstream historical fact that women in the imperial court spent hours on their needlework, creating beautiful silks and garments that were either for themselves or for the emperor. You have a small wooden embroidery frame and a basket filled with threads in every color imaginable. You are taught how to stitch a phoenix, a dragon, or a beautiful flower onto a silk robe. The process is slow and meticulous, but it's also a form of meditation. Your hands move with a practiced rhythm, your mind quieted by the repetitive motions. You are not just creating a piece of art, you are creating a gift for the emperor, a tangible representation of your devotion and your skill. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines would sometimes weave a secret message or a hidden symbol into their embroidery, a tiny, almost invisible code that only the emperor would be able to decipher. It was a way of communicating your true feelings in a world where you couldn't speak freely. Historians still argue whether the embroidery was a genuine creative outlet for the concubines, or if it was just another tool of control, a way of keeping them busy and docile. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages. You find yourself getting lost in the work, the hours slipping by. You can almost forget the politics, the rivalries, and the constant fear. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, this seemingly mundane task of embroidery is a beautiful and powerful tool. It's a way of expressing your creativity, of making your mark on the world. Even in this small, quiet way, you are a different kind of person now. You are not just a woman, you are an artist, and your art is your voice. While the palace is a gilded cage of power and politics, it's also a place of human desires. You hear whispered stories of forbidden love affairs, tales that are both romantic and tragic. It's a mainstream historical fact that concubines were forbidden from having any romantic relationships with anyone other than the emperor. The penalty for such a transgression was often death, not just for the concubine, but also for her family and her lover. This was a rule that was meant to be a constant reminder of their place in the world. They were the emperor's property, and they were not allowed to have any feelings for anyone else. You hear stories about a young concubine who fell in love with a handsome eunuch, a man who was gentle and kind, and who treated her with respect. Their love was a secret, a quiet flame that burned in the shadows of the palace. But their secret was eventually discovered, and the consequences were swift and brutal. She was executed, and he was tortured and killed. Their story is a part of the palace's folklore, a cautionary tale told by the older maids to the younger ones. A quirky little tidbit is that some of these forbidden romances were said to be so powerful that they even transcended the grave, with the ghosts of the lovers said to still haunt the palace. Historians still argue whether these stories were a genuine reflection of human emotion in a difficult world, or if they were created to instill fear in the concubines and to reinforce the rules of the court. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is a world of rules and expectations, but it is also a world of human hearts and human desires, and a human heart, no matter how controlled, will always yearn for love. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, these tragic, ugly love stories were a kind of beautiful rebellion, a reminder that even in a world of rules, you could still be human. You realize that your life here is a constant battle between your head and your heart. You are expected to be a pawn, a tool, an object of the Emperor's desires. But you are also a person, with a heart and with feelings, and you know that you must never, ever let your heart win, because in this world, love is a weakness, and it will get you killed. The palace, for all its beauty, is also a place of shadows and secrets. In the quiet of the night, you hear whispered ghost stories of the rear palace, tales passed down from generation to generation of maids and eunuchs. It's a mainstream historical fact that ancient palaces were often believed to be haunted, with stories of ghosts and spirits a common part of the folklore. These are not just stories, they are a way of making sense of the tragic lives of the women who came before you. You hear stories about the weeping willow concubine, a young girl who was said to have died of a broken heart after the emperor ignored her for years. Her spirit is said to still haunt the garden, her quiet sobs carried on the wind. You also hear about the jade-eyed maid, a beautiful servant who was accused of stealing a valuable jade hairpin and was executed. Her spirit is said to wander the halls, her eyes glowing with a cold, jade light, searching for her lost treasure. These are not just spooky tales, they are a kind of oral history, a way of remembering the women who were lost to the palace. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines would sometimes leave offerings of food and incense for the spirits of the dead concubines, a small gesture of respect and a silent plea for protection. Historians still argue whether these ghost stories were a genuine expression of the palace women's beliefs, or if they were a political tool used by the eunuchs to control the concubines and maids, a way of keeping them in line with a healthy dose of fear. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is a world of power and politics, and even the ghosts are a part of the game. You realize that you are not just a person in this palace, you are a part of its history. You are a part of its stories, both the beautiful and the tragic, and you know that one day, you might just be a ghost story yourself. Imperial favor, as you've learned, is a fleeting, precious thing, but when it's gone, the consequences are swift and brutal. You see a woman, a high-ranking consort, who was once the emperor's favorite. She had a son, a beautiful, intelligent boy who everyone believed would one day be the heir. But then, a new concubine arrived. A young, beautiful girl who captured the emperor's attention. The consort's visits to the emperor's bedchamber stopped, the gifts stopped coming, and her son, once the pride of the palace, was suddenly forgotten. This is the fall from imperial grace. It's a mainstream historical fact that a concubine who lost the emperor's favor could be stripped of her title, her servants, and even her living quarters. She would be moved to a smaller, colder pavilion, and she would be left to live out her days in quiet obscurity. You watch as the consort's servants, once so loyal, begin to abandon her. The other concubines, who once sought her out for her influence, now ignore her completely. She is a ghost, a living reminder of the dangers of this world. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines who fell out of favor were forced to move into the Cold Palace, a desolate and neglected part of the Forbidden City, where they were left to rot. Historians still argue whether the Cold Palace was a real place or a metaphor for a concubine's lost status and loneliness. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and a fall from grace is a fall from beauty and into a very ugly reality. You realize that your life here is a constant tightrope walk. You are always one wrong move away from losing everything. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, a fall from grace, an ugly reality, could be a moment of ugly, brutal, but necessary truth. You learn that your life is not a fairy tale, it is a game of survival, and you must always, always be on your guard. The palace is full of hidden treasures, and some of the most valuable are not made of gold or jade. You discover the grand library and forbidden books, a place that is off limits to most, but for you, a rare opportunity. It's a mainstream historical fact that the Imperial Library contained one of the largest collections of books and scrolls in the world, with texts on everything from history and philosophy to medicine and military strategy. It's a quiet, dusty place, filled with the scent of old paper and ink. You are not allowed to touch the most valuable books. but you are allowed to read the ones that are deemed appropriate for you. You spend hours here, your mind filled with the wisdom of the past. You read about the great dynasties, the rise and fall of emperors, and the lives of the women who came before you. You realize that your life is not a new story, it is a part of a long, continuing narrative. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would secretly have the eunuch librarians smuggle them forbidden books, texts on politics or military strategy, in the hopes of gaining an intellectual edge over their rivals. Historians still argue whether the emperor's library was a tool of control, a way of limiting what the concubines could learn, or if it was a genuine gesture of his intellectual generosity. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, these forbidden books, which could get you killed, are a beautiful and powerful tool. They are a way of gaining knowledge, of understanding the world you live in, and of learning how to survive. You are not just a concubine, you are a scholar, a student of history, and a woman who is trying to understand the world she lives in. Your mind is your greatest weapon, and this library is your arsenal. Beyond the human drama of the palace, there exists a world of quiet, majestic beauty. You get a rare invitation to visit the royal menagerie, a sprawling imperial zoo that houses exotic animals from every corner of the vast empire. It's a mainstream historical fact that emperors kept private menageries as a symbol of their wealth and power. It was a way of showing off the exotic animals that were brought to them as tribute from conquered territories and faraway lands. You see animals you have only ever heard about in stories, a tiger with stripes like 1,000 suns, a lion with a mane like a crown, and a rare, white elephant from the jungles of the south. It's a strange and beautiful world, and for a moment you can almost forget where you are. The air here is different, filled with the scent of wild animals and fresh hay. You walk along a path, and you hear the roar of a lion, a sound that shakes you to your core. You are told that the emperor often visited the menagerie to relax and to show off his power to foreign guests. A quirky little tidbit is that some of the animals were given names and had their own personal eunuch caretakers, who would speak to them as if they were people. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, these wild, beautiful animals, who are in a way prisoners themselves, are a kind of beautiful cage. Historians still argue whether the royal menageries were a genuine expression of the emperor's love for animals, or a political tool used to demonstrate his control over the natural world. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and these animals are no different. They are beautiful, majestic, and completely at the mercy of the emperor. You realize that you are just another animal in this strange and beautiful zoo. You are beautiful, and you are trapped, and you must learn to live with both realities. Amidst the constant surveillance and quiet sorrow of the palace, there are rare moments of public celebration and joy. The Festival of Lanterns is one of them. It's a mainstream historical fact that this festival, which marks the end of the Chinese New Year celebrations, was a massive, public spectacle. The entire Forbidden City, which is usually so quiet and somber, comes alive with light and sound. You are allowed to leave your pavilion and walk to the main courtyards, where the air is filled with the scent of roasted chestnuts and the sound of laughter. You see thousands of lanterns, each one a different shape and colour, hanging from the eaves of the pavilions and strung across the trees. They are made of silk and paper, and they are beautiful. You see families of eunuchs and maids, all of them smiling and pointing at the intricate designs. You are still a concubine, and you are still in a cage. But for a moment, you can almost forget it. A quirky little tidbit is that the emperor would often release his own lantern, a massive, elaborate contraption that was meant to signify his power and his hope for a prosperous year. Historians still argue whether the festivals were a genuine expression of joy or a political tool used by the emperor to make the public feel a sense of connection to their ruler. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and even joy, in this world, is a carefully managed performance. You look up at the sky, and you see the lanterns rising, small points of light against the black canvas of the night. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, The sadness and the confinement of your life here are a part of a larger, more beautiful story. The festivals, with all their beauty and their joy, are a beautiful reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for light. Your hair, you learn, is more than just a part of your body, it's a statement. The art of concubines' hair is a complex and symbolic language, and you must learn to speak it fluently. It's a mainstream historical fact that a concubine's hairstyle was a visual representation of her rank, her status, and even her mood. A low-ranking concubine might have a simple bun, but a high-ranking consort could have a towering, elaborate coiffure that would take hours to create. It was a masterpiece of pins, silks, and jewels, a kind of beautiful, complicated crown. You sit for hours as your maid, Xiao Mei, works on your hair. She pulls and twists and pins. Her hands a blur of motion. She adds delicate jade pins in the shape of flowers, and a small gold filigree butterfly that trembles with your every movement. You are told that this isn't just about looking beautiful, it's about sending a message. A specific kind of pin could signify your loyalty to a certain faction, and a certain kind of hairstyle could be a quiet plea for the emperor's attention. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would even use their hair to hide small, valuable objects, like a rare jade bead or a secret message. Historians still argue whether the elaborate hairstyles were a form of artistic expression or a form of social control, a way of keeping the women in their place. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, your hair, which is a part of your body, is a beautiful and powerful tool. It's a way of expressing your identity, of making your mark on the world. Even in this small, quiet way, you are not just a concubine, you are an artist, a canvas, and your hair is your masterpiece. And you know that your art is a language, and you must use it to survive. In the quiet halls of the palace, you are never truly alone. The emperor has a secret police, a network of spies and informants known as the censorate, and you feel their watchful eyes on you always. It's a mainstream historical fact that the censorate was an ancient government body responsible for supervising the bureaucracy and reporting any corruption or wrongdoing directly to the emperor. In the palace, their role was more sinister. They were the emperor's spies, and their job was to monitor the concubines, the eunuchs, and the ministers, reporting any sign of disloyalty or transgression. You are told to be careful of every single person you meet, because any one of them could be a censorate spy. A quirky little tidbit is that the censorate would sometimes disguise their agents as lowly eunuchs or maids, a trick that made them almost impossible to spot. Historians still argue whether the censorate was a necessary tool for maintaining a strong, stable government or a form of political repression that created an atmosphere of fear and paranoia. You suspect it was both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and the censorate is just another part of the gilded bars. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the censorate, a group of spies and informants, is a necessary part of the palace's beautiful and dangerous ecosystem. You learn to live with the constant feeling of being watched, to be careful of every single word you say, and to never, ever trust anyone. Your life here is a constant performance, and you are always on, always acting, and you know that one wrong move, one wrong word, and you could be gone forever. Your life here is a constant test, and the greatest of these is the price of loyalty. You are a concubine, and your loyalty is supposed to be to the emperor and the dynasty. But your heart and your mind are often pulled in different directions. You have family on the outside, a network of people who depend on you for their future. You have alliances with other concubines, women who have helped you and whom you have promised to help in return, and you have your own personal desires, a yearning for freedom and a life of your own. You are a woman with divided loyalties, and you are always being tested. You are approached by an older, high-ranking eunuch, a man who is a known informant for the censorate. He asks you about a rumor he heard, a whisper that a concubine is plotting to bring a powerful minister into the palace to undermine the emperor's authority. He looks at you with a cold, calculating gaze, and you know that your answer could be the difference between life and death. You know the truth of the rumor, and you know who is behind it. It is your closest ally, the woman who helped you when you first arrived at the palace. This is a moment of truth, a test of your loyalty. You can choose to be loyal to the emperor and betray your friend, or you can be loyal to your friend and risk your own life. This is the price of loyalty. It's a mainstream historical fact that concubines were often used as a tool for information, with eunuchs and ministers trying to get them to betray the emperor or their rivals. Historians still argue whether the loyalty of the concubines was to the emperor or to their own families. You suspect it was a bit of both. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would send their families coded letters, using a specific kind of silk or a secret symbol to communicate their true feelings and to warn them of danger. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, this difficult, ugly moment is a beautiful, necessary part of your life. It is a moment of truth, a moment that will define who you are, and you know that no matter what you choose, you will never be the same again. In a world where your every move is a struggle for survival, a rare few are rewarded with a stunning victory. You witness a concubine's impossible ascent, a woman who, for years, toiled in the lower ranks, suddenly finds herself elevated to the highest echelon of the rear palace. She becomes a consort, a title that comes with a new name, a new residence, and an entirely new level of power. It's a mainstream historical fact that while a woman's rank was often tied to her lineage, the emperor had the power to elevate a favorite concubine on a whim, a move that could send shockwaves through the entire court. You watch as the concubine, once so quiet and unassuming, now walks with a quiet confidence. She has more servants, her clothes are made of a more expensive kind of silk, and her jewelry is more lavish. She is no longer a small fish in a big pond, she is a shark. The other concubines, who once ignored her, now bow to her. Their faces a mask of polite respect. A quirky little tidbit is that when a concubine was elevated in rank, she would often hold a small banquet for her new peers, a way of subtly establishing her new status and her new power. Historians still argue whether these promotions were a genuine reward for loyalty and affection, or a strategic move by the emperor to shake up the political landscape of the rear palace. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and a promotion, in this world, is a larger, more beautiful cage. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty? In the same way, this promotion, which is a kind of beautiful gift, is a reminder of your place in the world. You are a pawn in a game of power, and your promotion is just a reminder that the game is still being played. You realize that your life here is a constant game of chance. You can do everything right. You can be beautiful and smart and loyal, and still lose. But sometimes, a miracle happens. And when it does, it's a reminder that no matter how difficult your life is, there is always hope for a better future. Among the daily routines of politics and arts, a rare and thrilling event would break the monotony. You receive a notice that the emperor is holding his annual grand imperial hunt, and you, as a concubine of a certain rank, are invited to attend. It's a mainstream historical fact that these hunts were not just a sport, they were a military exercise, a way for the emperor to test his skills and to show his physical prowess to his generals and his court. It was a massive undertaking, with thousands of soldiers, guards, and servants. You travel in a beautifully decorated carriage. But the air is different. It's filled with the scent of horses and leather and a sense of raw, masculine energy. You arrive at the hunting grounds, a vast expanse of forest and plains, and you are given a place to sit, a comfortable chair on a raised platform, from which you can watch the hunt. You see the emperor on his horse, a powerful, dark stallion. He is dressed in a simple hunting robe, and he holds his bow with a practiced ease. You watch as he rides into the forest, and you hear the sound of horns and the baying of dogs. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines were often dressed in a specific colour of silk, one that would make them easy to spot from a distance, a subtle reminder that even on a hunt, they were a part of the emperor's grand display. Historians still argue whether the emperor's hunts were a genuine love of sport or a political tool used to demonstrate his authority and to test the loyalty of his generals. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and even a hunt, in this world. is a carefully managed performance. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, this hunt, which is a kind of beautiful and dangerous sport, is a reminder of the Emperor's power and your place in his world. You are a woman, and you are not allowed to hunt. But you are a part of the show, and you know that your presence here is a testament to your worth. While the Emperor and the concubines are feasting on lavish meals, you get a glimpse behind the curtain into the world of the palace kitchens. It's a mainstream historical fact that the imperial kitchens were a massive, bustling operation with thousands of cooks and servants, all working around the clock to feed the hundreds of people who lived in the palace. You are allowed to take a rare tour, and you are immediately overwhelmed by the scale of it all. The air is thick with the scent of spices, and the sound of cleavers chopping on wooden boards is a constant, rhythmic hum. You see enormous woks, big enough to cook a small child, and shelves filled with exotic ingredients from every corner of the empire. You learn that a high-ranking concubine's meal is not just cooked by a single person, it is prepared by a team of specialists, each one responsible for a single dish. There are cooks who only prepare steamed fish, others who are responsible for roasted meats, and still others who specialize in delicate, sweet pastries. A quirky little tidbit is that the Emperor's meals were so vast that he would often only take a single bite of each dish, with the rest of the food being sent to the other concubines and servants. Historians still argue whether the Emperor's lavish meals were a sign of his wealth or a deliberate strategy to prevent assassination by poison. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and even the food you eat, in this world, is a part of the grand, beautiful, and dangerous game. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the bustling, loud, and messy palace kitchens are the beautiful, essential part of your life. They are the heart of the palace, the place where all the beauty and all the danger begins. In the world of the concubines, there is a certain kind of wisdom that cannot be found in books. It is the wisdom of the elders, the women who have lived in the palace for decades and who have seen everything. You learn to listen to their stories of the elders, because their words are a kind of map, a guide to the treacherous waters of the rear palace. It's a mainstream historical fact that older concubines, who had lost their beauty and their place in the emperor's bedchamber, were often relegated to a quiet life of solitude, but their minds were still sharp, and they held a wealth of knowledge. You visit an old concubine, a woman who is so frail and so old she looks like a wisp of smoke. She sits by a window. Her eyes are milky white, but her mind is as sharp as a blade. She tells you a story about a concubine who was so beautiful that she was able to sway the emperor's decisions, a woman who was more powerful than any minister. But she was also so arrogant that she forgot her place, and she was eventually brought down by a rival who used a subtle, ancient poison. The old woman's voice is a raspy whisper, but her words are like a cold wind. A quirky little tidbit is that some of these older women were said to have become so wise that they were able to read the future, using a special kind of tea leaf or a rare tortoise shell. Historians still argue whether the stories of the elders were a genuine reflection of their experiences or a way of passing on a kind of folklore, a series of cautionary tales meant to teach the younger concubines how to survive. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and these stories, which are a kind of beautiful and painful truth, are a reminder that no matter how beautiful you are not immune to the dangers of the world. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the ugly, painful truths of the elders' stories are a beautiful and necessary part of your life. They are a kind of shield, a kind of weapon, and you must use them to survive. While your life is confined within the palace walls, the world outside still turns. You hear quiet whispers of revolution, rumors of unrest and rebellion in the distant provinces. It's a mainstream historical fact that the stability of a dynasty was often fragile, with peasants rising up in protest against high taxes or corrupt officials. These rumors reach the palace through the eunuchs and the few trusted officials who are allowed to enter the inner court. They are told in hushed tones, with nervous glances, and you know that they are a sign of danger. You hear about a rebellion in the north, a group of angry farmers who are marching toward the capital. You hear about a general who has been secretly negotiating with the rebels, a man who is rumored to be planning to overthrow the emperor. These stories are a reminder that the palace, for all its strength, is a fragile thing, a beautiful facade that could crumble at any moment. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines would sometimes use these rumors to their advantage, offering a piece of information to the emperor in the hopes of winning his favor. Historians still argue whether the emperor's knowledge of the outside world was a necessary part of his job or a source of constant anxiety. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is a beautiful cage, and the world outside is a dangerous and chaotic place. You are safe here, but you are also a prisoner. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, these ugly, dangerous rumors are a kind of beautiful truth. They are a reminder that the world is a chaotic and beautiful place, and that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a better future. You are a concubine, and you are a prisoner, but you are also a part of a larger, more beautiful story, and you know that your life here is a part of a much larger, more dangerous game. Just when you thought you understood the fragile balance of the rear palace, everything shifts. You receive a notice that there is a new concubine arriving. It's a mainstream historical fact that the emperor's harem was in a constant state of flux, with new women being brought in from across the empire to replenish the ranks and to bring new blood into the court. The news sends a ripple of anxiety through the entire palace. Every woman, no matter her rank, feels a sense of dread. A new face means a new rival, a new set of alliances to form, and a new threat to your position. You watch as the new concubine, a young girl no older than you were when you arrived, is led into the inner court. She is beautiful, of course, but she has a different kind of beauty, a kind that is new and fresh and exotic. You learn that she is from a distant province, and her family is a powerful and influential one. You realize that she is not just a new face, she is a political pawn, a symbol of a new alliance and a new era. A quirky little tidbit is that the new concubine was often given a different kind of welcome depending on her family's power. A low-ranking concubine would be ignored, but a high-ranking one would be given a lavish banquet and a beautiful new pavilion. Historians still argue whether the arrival of new concubines was a way for the emperor to express his power, or a way of keeping the older concubines on their toes. You suspect it was both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and the new concubine is just another one. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the new concubine, who is a kind of beautiful and dangerous threat, is a part of the palace's beautiful and brutal ecosystem. You realize that your life here is a constant game of chance, and that the new concubine is just a new card in the deck. You must be careful, and you must be smart, because in this world, a new face is a new danger. For a man who is essentially a god, the emperor must, eventually, step down. This is the stage for the political machinations surrounding the emperor's retirement plan. It's a mainstream historical fact that an emperor, especially one who had a long and prosperous reign, would often abdicate the throne to his son. A process that was both a political necessity and a religious ritual. The succession of a new emperor was a time of great anxiety for everyone in the palace. A new emperor meant a new era, a new set of rules, and a new set of favorites. For you, as a concubine of the old emperor, this is a time of great uncertainty. You watch as the emperor, an old and tired man, begins to make preparations for his retirement. He names a crown prince, his most capable and loyal son, and he begins to train him, teaching him the secrets of the court and the burdens of state. This is a time of great political maneuvering. The ministers who supported the crown prince are now in a position of power, and the ones who didn't are in a position of great danger. For you, as a concubine of the old emperor, your fate is now in the hands of a new man. A quirky little tidbit is that a new emperor would often keep his father's concubines in the palace, but he would also give them a new title, often dowager, and they would be relegated to a quiet life of solitude. Historians still argue whether the emperor's abdication was a genuine act of piety or a political tool used to ensure a smooth transition of power. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and even a retirement, in this world, is a carefully managed performance. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty in the same way? The emperor's retirement, which is a kind of beautiful and peaceful end, is a reminder that even the most powerful people in the world are not in control of their own destiny. You realize that your life here is a constant game of chance, and that your future is in the hands of a man you may not even know. The inevitable death of an emperor is not just a personal loss, it's a public, political, and highly ritualized event. You find yourself participating in the ritual of imperial mourning, a somber and intricate series of ceremonies that mark the end of an era. It's a mainstream historical fact that an emperor's death was a national event, with the entire court and country going into a period of mourning that could last for years. You are dressed in a simple, unadorned white robe, a symbol of your grief and your new status. The entire palace is draped in white cloth, and all the gold and jade ornaments are removed. The vibrant, beautiful world you have come to know is suddenly muted, a ghost of its former self. You attend a series of ceremonies, each one more somber than the last. You watch as the new emperor, the crown prince you saw preparing, now a man burdened with the weight of the empire, performs the rituals. You see the empress, now the empress dowager, her face a mask of grief and power. You are a small to insignificant part of this grand, tragic drama, and you are told that you must not speak, that you must not laugh, and that you must not even shed a tear. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would feign a deeper sense of grief than their rivals. A quiet performance that was meant to show their loyalty to the deceased emperor. Historians still argue whether the long period of mourning was a genuine expression of grief or a political tool used to ensure a smooth transition of power. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and a funeral, in this world, is just another one. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, this sad, beautiful, and brutal funeral is a reminder that even the most powerful people in the world are not immune to the cold, hard reality of death. Your life here is a constant game of chance, and your future, which was once tied to a single man, is now in the hands of a new one, and you know that your life, as you know it, is over. The emperor's death marks the end of your life as you knew it, but what happens to the women he leaves behind? This is the chapter on a concubine's legacy. It's a mainstream historical fact that concubines who did not bear a son, or a son who did not become the next emperor, were often relegated to a quiet, secluded life. They would be moved to a smaller, less opulent pavilion, and their contact with the outside world would be severely limited. They were now known as dowagers, and their life was a slow, quiet fading into obscurity. They were no longer concubines, they were just women who once had a life in the palace. You watch as the other dowagers, the women who came before you, walk with a quiet, resigned sadness. They spend their days in their pavilions, reading books, doing embroidery, and talking to their servants. They are no longer a part of the palace's political drama, but they are still a part of its history. They are living ghosts, a quiet reminder of the fleeting nature of imperial favor. A quirky little tidbit is that some of these dowagers would become the unofficial historians of the palace, telling stories and passing on their knowledge to the younger concubines. It was a way of preserving the memories of the women who were lost to the palace, a way of keeping their legacy alive. Historians still argue whether the dowagers' quiet lives were a form of punishment or a necessary part of the palace's structure. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and even a quiet, peaceful life can be a kind of prison. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the sad, quiet lives of the dowagers are a kind of beautiful truth. They are a reminder that even after you lose everything, you can still find a kind of peace. Your life here is a constant game of chance, and your legacy is a quiet one. For some concubines, their journey in the palace doesn't end in quiet solitude, but in a rare and extraordinary freedom. This is the life beyond the imperial court. It's a mainstream historical fact that some concubines, especially those who were from a lower-ranking family or those who had no children, were sometimes released from the palace after the emperor's death. This was a rare but celebrated event. It was a kind of a lottery, and the prize was your freedom. These women were not just released, they were given a small stipend, a new name, and a chance to live a normal life. You hear stories about a concubine who, after being released, married a merchant and lived a quiet, peaceful life in the countryside. You hear about another who became a nun, dedicating her life to a different kind of service. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines who were released from the palace were often given a new name, a way of severing their ties with their past life and their past identity. They were no longer a concubine, they were just a woman. Historians still argue whether the emperor's act of releasing concubines was a genuine act of generosity or a way of showing the public that he was a benevolent and kind ruler. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and even freedom in this world is a carefully managed performance. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the ugly, painful reality of your life here is a kind of beautiful truth. It is a reminder that no matter how trapped you feel, there is always hope for a better future. You realize that your life here is a constant game of chance, and that your future is in the hands of a man you may not even know, but for a few, a very rare few. The end of the game is not a quiet life in solitude, but a chance at a real, honest-to-goodness life of your own, and you realize that, perhaps, is the greatest prize of all. As you live out your days in the palace, you become intimately familiar with its unspoken sorrows. You feel the quiet melancholy that permeates every gilded wall, a sense of loneliness that is woven into the very fabric of the forbidden city. This is the unspoken sorrows of the palace. It's a mainstream historical fact that for all their beauty and power, the concubines were often deeply lonely. They were separated from their families, their friends, and their past lives. They were surrounded by rivals, and they were always on their guard. The only person they could truly trust was their personal maid. And even that was a fragile, dangerous relationship. You sit in your courtyard, a place of peace and beauty, but you feel a deep, aching sense of solitude. You are a woman with no friends, no family, and no future that is not tied to the whims of the emperor. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, the sadness and the loneliness of your life here are a kind of beautiful, brutal truth. It is a reminder that even in the most beautiful places in the world, you can still feel a deep, soul-crushing sense of isolation. A quirky little tidbit is that concubines would often write poems about their loneliness, their longing for their families, and their quiet grief. These poems were often shared in secret, a way of finding a sense of community in their shared sadness. Historians still argue whether the loneliness of the concubines was a result of the palace's rules, or if it was an inevitable part of a life lived in a world of power and politics. You suspect it was both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and your sadness, in this world, is a kind of beautiful truth. It is a reminder that even in a world of rules and expectations, you are still a person with a heart and with feelings, and you know that you must learn to live with your sadness. Because in this world, you have to be strong, even when you feel like you're about to break. As you come to the end of your time in this world, you take a final look at a gilded cage. It's a mainstream historical fact that for all its beauty and its power, the Forbidden City was a kind of prison. It was a place where your life was not your own, where your every move was watched, and where your future was in the hands of a man you may not even know. You remember that crocodile dung sunscreen, and how an ugly thing could be used for beauty. In the same way, this ugly, painful reality of your life here is a kind of beautiful truth. It is a reminder that no matter how beautiful a cage is, it is still a cage. You walk through the courtyards for the last time. The air is still filled with the scent of sandalwood, but it is now mixed with the scent of old memories and quiet regrets. You see the other concubines, their faces a mask of polite indifference. You see the eunuchs, their faces a mask of quiet loyalty. You see the empress, her face a mask of power. You realize that you are a part of a long, continuing story, a story that is both beautiful and tragic. A quirky little tidbit is that some concubines would leave a small, symbolic object, a single pearl or a delicate silk flower, in their pavilion before they left, a quiet mark of their existence in a world that would so quickly forget them. Historians still argue whether the concubines of ancient China were truly happy or if they were just a part of a beautiful and brutal system. You suspect it was a bit of both. The palace is full of beautiful things that are also cages, and your life, in this world, is a kind of beautiful and brutal truth. You have been a concubine, a mother, a scholar, an artist, a prisoner, and a survivor. You have lived a life that is both a fairy tale and a nightmare, and as you walk away, you know that you will never be the same again. Your life, as you know it, is over. End of script. Sweet dreams.